Netflix's adaptation of 100 Years of Solitude, the classic novel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, had an ending that was just as confusing and metaphorical as the book. 100 Years of Solitude follows the Buendia family and their life in the fictional Colombian town of Macondo across several generations. Their story is also sprinkled with bits of magical realism, supernatural events, and moments that predict the future. Reviews of 100 Years of Solitude have praised the show's ability to translate that magic to live action and retain its importance both visually and narratively. Quite a few things happened in the final episode of 100 Years of Solitude Season 1. 2 members of the Buendia family died. Colonel Aureliano finally faced the firing squad that was hinted at in the first moments of the show, and some major setup for 100 Years of Solitude Season 2 happened. In all the excitement of the finale and the intricate and interconnected storylines, some of the show's more important moments may not have been entirely clear. Even if they were clear, there's always more to 100 Years of Solitude than meets the eye, so it never hurts to take a closer look. Why was Jose Arcadio murdered and who killed him? Jose Arcadio's killers were never discovered, but they may have been the farmers he stole from. Jose Arcadio dead in a coffin in 100 Years of Solitude. In a sudden twist in 100 Years of Solitude Season 1's ending, Jose Arcadio was murdered in his home. Unfortunately, as the narrator explained, Jose Arcadio's murder is the only unsolved mystery in Macondo's history, so no one knows definitively who killed him. However, it does seem very likely that he was killed by one of the farmers he stole land from. Just before Jose Arcadio was killed, he had taken money from some farmers and told them to get their sons to stop playing soldier so they could pay him, and it's not a stretch to imagine they were angry with him. Jose Arcadio's death also highlights a recurring theme in 100 Years of Solitude. Even though he had given up his womanizing ways and returned to his home, he couldn't outrun his past mistakes, and no one in the Buendia family could. Eventually, the pain he inflicted on others came back to haunt him, and Jose Arcadio had to pay with his life. Why Aureliano Jose wanted to sleep with Amaranta? The Buendia family's history is a never-ending cycle of incest and pain. Amaranta and Aureliano Jose looking panicked in 100 Years of Solitude. Somewhat surprisingly, Aureliano Jose, Arcadio's son, fell in love with Amaranta at the end of 100 Years of Solitude, despite the fact that she was his aunt. Incestuous relationships were very common in the show, as Jose Arcadio Buendia and Ursula were cousins before they were married, but it still came as a bit of a shock that Aureliano Jose wanted to sleep with his aunt. Aureliano Jose's desire to have an incestuous relationship was because 100 Years of Solitude is largely a story about how the past can repeat itself in a never-ending cycle. Just as Jose Arcadio Buendia fell in love with Ursula despite the warnings they received about having an incestuous relationship, Aureliano Jose also fell in love with Amaranta despite her warnings. While 100 Years of Solitude does somewhat confirm the idea of history being a repeating cycle, it also has critiques for that idea. Aureliano Jose and Amaranta may have been more inclined to start an incestuous relationship because of their family's history, but Amaranta also refused. She broke the cycle, and didn't give birth to more cursed children with her nephew. What the yellow flowers at Jose Arcadio Buendia's death mean? Yellow represents death, change, and destruction in 100 Years of Solitude. Ursula Igueron, Marley de Soto, wearing a black gown and veil walking in a funeral procession on yellow flowers in 100 Years of Solitude. When Jose Arcadio Buendia finally died after his years-long madness in 100 Years of Solitude, it rained yellow flowers throughout Macondo. There's no shortage of supernatural events in the show, but every instance of magic in 100 Years of Solitude has a deeper meaning, and this is no different. The yellow flowers that rained down at Jose Arcadio Buendia's death represent death, change, and destruction. The yellow flowers also signal the future of 100 Years of Solitude. Just after the flowers fell, Colonel Aureliano began his attack on Macondo, which was one of several significant changes for the town. Why Aureliano attacks Macondo and how he fulfills 100 Years of Solitude's omens. Aureliano was consumed by war and ideology, which turned him into the monster Ursula feared. When Jose Arcadio Buendia first married Ursula, she worried endlessly that she would give birth to a monster. Ursula originally thought her child would be a monster because of some birth defect, and she checked all her children to make sure they didn't have tails like pigs. When Aureliano attacked Macondo, he became the monster Ursula feared giving birth to without even having a pig's tail. It's not entirely clear in 100 Years of Solitude how Aureliano became a monster or why Ursula thought he was one at all, but the reason he attacked Macondo explains it all. Macondo had been experiencing peace since Jose Raquel Moncada began governing the town, even though he was a member of the Conservatives. Conversely, Aureliano had only grown more violent in the years since the Colombian Civil War started, and he had continued his rebellion long after the liberals had wanted to sign a peace treaty. Aureliano attacked Macondo simply because it was ruled by a conservative. He didn't want to help the people there, he just wanted to hurt the people he hated and pad his own ego in the process. Any man who would sacrifice his family's peace for his own pride is a monster. What happens after Aureliano's attack on Macondo in 100 Years of Solitude? Aureliano eventually signs the peace treaty and Macondo is destroyed in a few generations. Aureliano Buendia's Claudio Cattaneo, silhouetted against a fire in 100 Years of Solitude. The ending of 100 Years of Solitude was very far from the ending of the original novel, and it's also not the ending of the entire series. Netflix has confirmed that 100 Years of Solitude will be released in 2 parts, meaning there are 8 more episodes on the horizon to finish out the story of Macondo and the Buendia family, via Tudum. Some viewers may wonder what 100 Years of Solitude Season 2 has in store, and the novel has some answers about what comes after Aureliano's attack on Macondo. Eventually, Aureliano's attack on Macondo is successful. He and his rebels take control of the town, and they depose José Raquel Moncada. Aureliano then gives back all the land José Arcadio stole, replaces the conservatives' laws, and agrees to execute Moncada against Ursula's wishes, and despite Moncada telling him that he has become the very tyrannical leader he set out to depose. Years later, Aureliano agrees to sign the peace treaty and lives out his days making jewelry. 100 Years of Solitude then examines the remaining members of the Buendia family, all of which end in tragedy. The true meaning of 100 Years of Solitude Season 1's ending explained. José Arcadio Buendia lying dead in a casket in 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude is one of the most important novels in the